Hi, everyone. Welcome to Ideas Sin. My name is Denise, and I am your host, like always, because this is my podcast. And today I'm excited to introduce Brandon Day. So, Brandon and I met, oh my gosh, last year around this time, I think, actually.
Yep.
Yeah.
The Winter Expo down there in, was that Austin?
Oh, Houston.
Houston.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
So yeah, that was beginning of December last year.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Yeah. And so we ended up meeting at Precision Camera. Like they had a workshop on wildlife photography. And you were there with Michael Morrow, I
Mhm.
guess like your business partner, I can say, right?
Yep. On Truth and Legend side. Yep.
Yeah. And y'all were hosting a workshop on getting into wildlife photography. And then you guys ended up doing
Mhm.
like another segment on videography or something.
Yeah. There was another workshop set up for audio, and
That's what it was.
the gentleman didn't show up, and so they were just going to cancel it. And there was a ton of people there, so we were like, "Oh, we'll just cover it for you." And over lunch, we put together a terrible presentation with not a lot of good audio, and it kind of proved the point. And we had like a little JBL speaker. It was the worst. But I think you were in that one. There was
Mhm.
probably 5 or 6 others in there, and it was more conversational instead of just a lecture. And I think it went so much better than just telling people what they need to know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like you're saying like you prepared it during lunch. I feel like I was talking to you and Michael for most of that time period. So of course you had to
Yep.
like scramble through and just be like, let's just throw this shit
Yep.
together and see how it goes.
Right. Right. And we used a lot of bear footage, and so
Mhm.
we showed a bear walking through, and there was no audio, I think, and we said, "What do you hear?" And so people would call out what they'd hear. Oh, I hear birds, I hear the water, I hear footsteps. And it's just interesting to hear. And then you play the clip, and then you hear all the other stuff that you don't think about, like the wind covering the microphone, the little voice that the bear has.
Mhm.
And it's just, for those that are creators, audio is so important. And most people will stop listening if there's bad audio before they'll stop watching something that's less interesting. So audio is important.
Yeah,
I think we got that point across.
I think so too. Yeah, I
Okay.
I could be an audiophile, well, with music especially. Like I really love getting
Okay.
into the depths of music. And when I
Yep.
hear something that sounds shitty, I'm like, oh, next.
Right.
On to the
Right.
next one.
Yeah. It's almost immediate. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but did you grow up with a background in audio? I know from our conversation that's not initially what you started with, but on the audio side of things, I don't think I ever got that clarification.
No, I've learned everything that I've from an audio standpoint of having to do video and just capture the audio side. And so once you start down that road, it just becomes a first you think the little microphone on top of the cameras. I'm recording through a camera, that's why I'm pointing at you all.
Mhm.
Um, you think that those are good enough, and then you listen to it, and then you hear something else. You're like, oh, well, how did they do that? Well, it's a bigger microphone. They're closer to the subject, and so it's just YouTube educated at this point, and just learning on the job. Um, but my growing up, I was doing mechanic work, and I grew up on a ranch, so we bucked hay, and
Mm.
that nothing to do with audio except maybe a rap from a motorcycle when we got to go out. But no, it was nothing to do with audio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a transition from working on a farm to going into YouTube. I mean,
Hmm.
so for listeners and viewers, what got you into YouTube?
Oh gosh. So I grew up in the mountains in a little town called Bailey. It's about an hour outside of Denver, and it's close enough that you can go to Denver, but it's far enough that you're not doing it every day, especially when you're in high school and you're broke.
Mm.
And so I got a job as soon as I could, and it was like cutting the heads off of thistles and spraying weed killer down them. And that quickly didn't work out. So as soon as I graduated, I went to the big city thinking I'm going to go just grab the world and put it in my pocket. And it just did not happen. So I ended up getting a corporate job for like accounting, and I worked my way up over 18 years through a corporate job. And in 2022, we ended up selling the company, and I had moved my way up to like the head of investor relations at the company. And I decided I just wasn't going to move to Houston, and I was done. And so I quit my job and went into this video world. And moving into the video world from corporate America, you think, well, I got a camera, I got a microphone, let's go make some videos. And that's just not how it works. Like, you need to have contacts, you need to have advertising. And so I had a lot of time. And I met Michael while we were on a filming Bears. And he was like, big on YouTube. And I had been thinking about it. And so next thing you know, I'm like, I'm doing it. And so I posted a video every week for like 20 weeks.
Mm.
And it was just exhausting. And they say that you got to post 100 videos before you get traction. And I'm nowhere near that. But it's just every week is focusing on content. And as soon as I started getting a lot more commercial work, I just couldn't keep it up. And I'd rather focus on client work that's paying versus just YouTube, where I was just vlogging. And it wasn't that interesting for the majority of people.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, the whole YouTuber world it feels like everybody wants to get into it. I mean, I've
Yeah.
dabbled with the idea as well, but I'm like, I don't know what I would put on there. I don't
Right.
know how to edit this stuff or market it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we started, so we're back at it,
Mhm.
Michael and I, and I'll reference Michael. He's the, we actually have three. It's Eric Youngblood, Michael Morrow, and myself on the YouTube channel. And we started up Truth and Legend YouTube again. So we're 4 videos in, and we have 1 podcast out there now. So we're just getting that started back up. But it takes a lot more. It's a natural history channel for the most part. We are going to talk about commercial stuff, but for the most part, we're wildlife photographers and videographers. And making a sequence with a moose, for example, or a brown bear is so much harder than just going out and filming like what's in my backpack.
Mhm.
And so I think Michael spent 35 days with moose.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to be up there with him, but I was doing commercial work. Again, you just got to stick with what I'm a big person for responsibilities. If I've said I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. So it was just sticking with all those things that I'd agreed to.
Yeah.
But yeah, YouTube's I would say anyone that wants to get into filming should go make their own YouTube and just figure it out, because it teaches you how to edit. Number one, it teaches you through that edit process what you're missing, whether it's video footage, B-roll footage, audio, and it's going to make you a much better videographer or even a storyteller at that. And so I would definitely recommend everyone at least try it if they're interested in it, because you're going to level up pretty quickly through it. But that's just personal preference.
Yeah. That's awesome. I like the B-rolls. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
I'm like a B-roll queen. It's like, give me a camera and I'm like the one capturing all of that. Like
Right.
sitting stationary and just recording something is just really boring
Right.
to me. I'm just like, okay, yeah, I could sit here for a while, but again, depends
Totally.
the subject. But I mean, speaking of subjects, you got into wildlife photography and
Mm-hmm.
videography, and that's how I like met you. And
Mm-hmm.
so, what even brought you to that? Going from corporate to being like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to go do video, but I want to get into wildlife photography, videography
Mm-hmm.
specifically. I mean, you do some other
Yeah.
photography as well, but why wildlife?
Wildlife is just well, number one, like, people complain, wildlife doesn't complain. And so the difference is people pay money and wildlife doesn't pay.
Yeah.
Uh, and so you got to get the footage, you got to sell stock footage or work with big trade companies. But there's just a humbleness that comes with filming or photographing wildlife. As I've progressed, there's just something that reminds you. For example, I was filming a brown bear, and this brown bear had moved in close, and we were in Katmai. And the rule there is, if the animal approaches you, it's fine, but do not approach the animal.
Hmm.
And so this brown bear had brought, it was a sow, and she had brought her 2 cubs, and she ended up 20 feet from us. And she spent 8 hours with us. And these brown bears can get 800 to 1,000 pounds.
Mhm.
They're well fed. They eat salmon a lot. They're not having to scavenge like a grizzly bear would. And there's just something absolutely humbling about sitting across from an 800-pound predator that reminds you how insignificant you are in the world, that then reminds you how significant everything is to your life, right? And between that and the quiet, and it's just nice to be out there. but it is hard to make it in wildlife photography, which is why I have to do the commercial stuff. And that's primarily how we pay our bills, is through commercial photography and video. But if I could do wildlife every single day, I would. We were up yesterday trying to film some rams, and we found probably 60 of them through the course of the day.
Mm.
And you get home and you just feel, I don't know, there's just something about connecting with the wild that um, maybe it's instinctual, being that that's kind of how we felt back in the day, and we had to live off the earth, and maybe it's just that connection. I'm not sure, but I just love being outdoors and with the wild. I ended up getting into video and photos through birds, funny
Oh,
enough.
really?
And
Mm.
yeah, well, because living in the city,
Yeah.
we don't have much here in Littleton and or Denver. And so you look for all these subjects, and you have this big lens, and you got your camera, and you're like, I'm going to take pictures of all these things. And you go to the big places, right, that everyone knows about. You go to Rocky Mountain National Park. You go to the animal sanctuaries and do that. And you figure out that the sanctuaries are cool to take a picture of, but you're not going to get anything that's award winning.
Yeah.
And then you start focusing, well, there's a little bird in my backyard. And so then it turns from a little brown bird into a little brown bird with yellow highlights. And then it turns into, well, oh, that's maybe a yellow warbler, or maybe it's a goldfinch. And then it turns into, well, that's an American goldfinch, but it's a non-breeding male and it's in its winter plumage. And so it's contagious
Yeah.
for some people. And that's how I got into it. I loved photographing cars, but cars, again, we're in Colorado. It only uses 6 to 7 months out here. And so what else are you going to photograph? And birds. And so that's what got me into it.
Yeah. Birds are
Yeah.
really cool though. Like the more you
Yeah.
get into it and the more you
Mm-hmm.
learn about it and their structure and their capabilities, it's super
Oh,
cool.
yeah. Yeah. And noises they make,
Yeah.
like a raven can emulate most noises. Grackles make some weird noises.
Mhm.
So it's just cool to hang out with them.
Yeah. I mean, do you have a
Yeah.
favorite bird?
I love owls. So
Mhm.
any owl is just a big win for me. We found, well, I said we, but I found 8 long-eared owls last winter. We got to spend, I don't know, 3 days with them.
Nice.
And then we just owls are kind of boring during the day. They scratch, they preen, they sleep. And so you can only do so much with
Yeah.
that footage. So unless someone pushes them, and we don't push anything and we don't bait. So
Yeah.
it's pretty boring from us. But um, we went up to Alaska in March to film eagles, and we got on a great gray owl, which is a huge owl, and we don't have them here in Denver unless there's something wrong with the bird and it flies the wrong way. And so that was really cool to see a great gray owl. And I can send you an image that you can pop up here for everyone to see.
Yeah, I'd love that.
So
And I'd love
yeah,
to figure out how to do that. But yeah.
yeah, it's cool. Yeah, you'll figure
I'll
it out.
figure it
You
out.
got it. You got
Yeah.
this.
That's how I roll. I'm like, I don't know what I'm
Right.
doing, but fuck it.
Yeah, that's
Let's
how
see
I
how
do
it goes.
things. Yeah. Yep.
Oh, so okay, so you both end up just filming in like Colorado and Alaska. Are you ever going to
Mhm.
other states or even other countries to go and film or photograph animals?
Um, Me particularly, I don't leave the country yet. We have some discussions in getting out of the country. There's just so much here in like the US and Canada and even Mexico.
Mhm.
We go to a lot of different states. I was just down in Texas, down by South Padre, and they actually have one of the largest trails just because Texas is huge, but it's a big birding trail and it follows the entire island. But they have a big refuge down there, and it's part of the birding trail. It's the South Padre birding, has something to do with alligators on the last part, but
Mm.
they rescue alligators that can't be rehomed essentially. And then they educate the masses, but then they also have this giant boardwalk of birds. And so I got to check a bunch of birds off. They had like rosette spoonbills and great blue herons and some cool stuff. So yeah, we were just down there doing that. And then New Mexico for the cranes. We do Alaska. There's Oregon, Washington, uh, Utah. Utah has some great wild horses if you can find them.
Oh, that would be
Yeah,
cool. What about
yeah. We're gonna.
Wyoming?
Yeah, We try to stay out of the big national parks. It
Oh.
just, it's too much for us,
Hmm.
because the problem that we have is as soon as you pull out a big camera, we're not using like little mirrorless setups. We do have those and we use them, but for the most part, we're shooting on Reds or an FX6 or something large. And as soon as we pull that out, we can see this lens right back here. As soon as you pull something out
Mhm.
like that, it is a traffic jam. And you could be photographing a flower. And as soon as you pull that out, people just start slamming on the brakes like there's a grizzly bear. And so you got to be a little thoughtful in your placement of those.
There's a
Yeah,
bear. It's like, no, it's just a pretty
exactly.
flower.
Right.
It's
And
actually a
that's
weed.
happened before. Right. Right. Or the water, or just,
Yeah.
yeah. But we do, there's antelope in Wyoming that are really cool to film. They're pretty, most of the areas are hunted, so they're
Mm.
pretty skittish. Um, so you have to sit in a blind, you got to creep up into an area where you kind of predict where they're going to be. There's a ton of birds again. You have the grouse and greater prairie chickens that you want to do if you want to see that, if you go find a lek. But so many of these leks are being shut down that it's just people, right? They build, and next thing you know, the habitat's gone, and so those birds are gone for a while or forever. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, Wyoming's a good one. The East Coast is somewhere we're probably going to focus on here in a few years, just because there's a ton of birds out there. Number one,
Mhm.
but then you got stuff like Louisiana and Florida that have swampland,
Yeah.
and then you get into the gators and the snakes and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Get ready for the biting flies that are down in
Yeah.
Florida. Oh my gosh. I went down there and I was just kind of doing my little version of wildlife
Yeah.
photography. These flies just kept attacking me and I was just getting so pissed off. I was like taking off my bags and just swatting at them like crazy.
Yep.
I mean, but y'all probably have to deal with that kind of stuff all the time, depending on where it is that you're going. So, for
Yep.
anybody who's unfamiliar with wildlife photography or videography, like what do you actually have to pack, and how do you optimize the kind of gear that you take, even when you're traveling? Because
Yep.
again, the gear is not light. There's a lot of different aspects of instruments and clothing and all this stuff that you have to pack. So how are y'all optimizing all that when you go on shoots?
Yeah. We try to pack it into one backpack. When you fly, that doesn't work out so well, just because the backpacks that we carry these cameras in, like I carry an f-stop Shin. It's a 70-liter backpack. You can't bring that on the plane. And so what you end up doing is breaking down these cameras, and you've got to put them together at location, and then we'll just throw them on the tripod, and then we'll carry them on the tripod most of the time to the location that we're hiking into. There are some areas where we can go pretty slim and just bring a monitor, a camera, the lens. Um, it depends on which camera we're shooting. You need to bring neutral density filters. For those that aren't familiar with that, when you get into video, you lose your triangle of exposure, and so you don't get to change your shutter speed. And so the way you end up cutting light, once you get your aperture dialed in for your depth of field, you use neutral density. And so you got to pack your neutral density filters. You can do that through a map box that sits on the end of it, or you can do a variable. Um, we don't use a lot of variable filters, just because if you buy a cheap one or something happens to it, you'll get an X pattern that runs through the footage. And on 8K footage, you really notice that.
Mm.
And it's just, we try not to do that. We do, sometimes you just got to deal with if you can't carry it in, you can't do that. And then you got to bring all your other stuff like water and food. And so most of the time our packs are anywhere between 40 and 60 pounds, depending on what we have in it. Um, and you just you just carry the pack as far as you can, and you hope you get something. But most of the time we know the area that we're getting into and what's there and what we're looking for, and we have good intel on it. Um, I mean, sometimes you go out for like waterfowl and you just hope. They're very skittish most of the time, and so you have to sit in a blind. I sat outside one time waiting for one duck, and it was -20, and I just laid on the ground in like a blind cover that you can get for like the ground cover, and it was 2 hours, I think, of just lying there still, and I got it. Um, but it was sometimes it's just all about patience with wildlife. That's a big thing. Patience and perseverance. If you're out there enough and you have the patience, you're gonna get whatever you need. But yeah, we if you go into like Alaska, you're gonna carry a flare, bear spray. So that's something that you're gonna carry on your chest. We don't carry any firearms. There's no need for that. Um, I guess there's probably some debate for that for individuals, but and then all the other things, headlamps, in case you're out there. Right now, it gets dark early, so at 4:30, we walked out in the dark yesterday when you were looking for those sheep. I'm trying to think of all the other little things. Yeah, we mostly do it through backpacks. If we are traveling into a place where we know baggage isn't an issue, like Alaska has baggage issues if you're coming in on a plane, just because they're going to say you got 50 pounds or 70 pounds or whatever it is in the back of that plane, better be able to get it in there. If there's not that, like if we're going to Florida and we have a hotel room and a car,
Mhm.
we'll throw it in a Pelican case and just pick what we want for the day. If we're doing wides or tights or B-roll or whatever it is, we'll just design for the day. And sometimes you don't need those big cameras if you're doing slider work, right? So it depends on the moment, which is it depends is going to be a slogan for questions maybe.
I mean, it just sounds like hunting as well. Like
Yeah.
I've hunted before like years ago, and it's the same thing. You're literally just walking
Hmm.
out and you're just kind of hoping for the best, and you just have to sit and wait like you're saying. In photography, it's like the same thing, only like your shot is kind of different than
Hmm.
the hunter's shot. So, yeah,
Yep.
patience is definitely a virtue in that game, but it is
Yeah.
really nice because it allows you to be open to your environment, it feels like. So, do you feel like it's allowed you to really ground yourself and connect to yourself more than how you were when you were working corporate, for example?
Yeah, definitely. The way I describe corporate work is I felt like a caged lion, and
Mm,
I mean that's a little bit of like me comparing myself to a lion. Like let's laugh at that first, but the that's the feeling you get sometimes when you're doing something that you maybe don't necessarily love. And I had a great job. The last 10 years, I made good money. It was, I mean, everything that someone thinks they want for the most. I mean, you go to college thinking that's what you want, right? Um, but it was always just something that was missing, and I couldn't put my foot on it. And you just become a little unhappy with the world, and you don't know why. And maybe it's just life passes you by a little bit. And I mean, I made the comment earlier, I was going to put the world in my pocket, right?
mhm,
And most of us don't do that. And so there is that kind of harsh reality of like, hey, you aren't doing this, and the world kind of puts you in your place. And so there's a little bit of resentment, I think, that falls through that. But once once I moved full time into freelancing, it was amazing. I
mm,
had all the risk in the world. Paycheck was what you made of it. It started. We moved on to my wife's insurance because she had gone back to a job, and she was a stay at home before this. So we kind of flip flopped,
mhm,
and it should have been like the most scary, anxiety inducing time, but it's been fun, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. Um, but yeah, I think being outdoors is just something that grounds you. And the only thing I'd say is if I could have both, where and I we do that now. I work in the office, right, and then I get to go out. You can never have it the best way, right? And so, like right now, I'm thinking, oh, I need to be out in the field, and I need to be doing more of that. But then, if you're not in here editing videos for clients, you're not making money.
mhm,
So I think a little bit of self reflection and temperament of like, what do you actually need to be doing? What do you want to be doing? And really focusing on those goals has really helped me at least.
mhm. And
So,
and so do you think that the transition from corporate to freelancing was easier because of your partner? Or do you think that if your partner wasn't there, it still would have been a pretty easy transition?
Um, I think I had the benefit. So corporate work, I worked, um, being the head of investor relations, I dealt with Wall Street most times. We were in Chicago, New York, San Francisco, Toronto. I mean, we were in major hubs talking to big funds. It was a $5 billion company that we ended up growing. So I had a different perspective than most people on just the world. I saw a different world than most people. I mean, you get to watch movies about it, right? Like The Big Short. And I think that kind of dissuaded me from pursuing that further and moving into like a VP role of finance or something. And I just didn't want it. I wanted to just do my job and be able to go home. I think when I met Michael, he's good about telling you, well, that might be a good idea, but think about it. And so he never really told me, like, do this. I had to figure everything out.
Mhm.
The best thing that I would say about having someone like that is he's critical. Like when I would show him something, he'd be like, no, that sucks.
Mhm.
And he was just like,
Try
that's
again.
exactly what you need to hear. It
Yeah.
hurts, but it's like, yeah. And so I think if it doesn't need to be like a business partner, it doesn't need to be anyone. You just need to find someone that's critical of your work in the beginning where you can grow quickly. Because if you don't have that, then you're learning the hard way through like client interactions of clients being like, this isn't really what we wanted or
Mm,
whatever. And sometimes you can close that gap through communication. And communication is huge with clients. If you do pre-calls and pre-production, the problem with that is you're cutting into your margin, right? Because that's more time, and that means on a per hour basis you're being paid less. But in the beginning, I think communication is key for that. But back to the whole mentor kind of side of it, find someone that's critical, and that's going to help you grow a ton. So I think I would have done it, but it would have been a heck of a lot longer. Even with him, it was 6 months before I made any revenue in the
mm,
commercial side. So it's a long horizon. And they say that most businesses are 3 years before they're in the green. I'll actually do a green year this year. So that's not bad. But 3 years is a long time. And most
yeah.
small businesses fail. That's the other thing. So
Well, congratulations for the green. That's exciting.
thanks. Hopefully it continues next year.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Yeah.
if you continue, who knows? Like your clients may refer you to other
Right.
folks and, hopefully just keep that ball rolling.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. And so do you think that Michael influenced your interest in wildlife photography, or was that something that you were interested in prior to meeting him?
Oh, that was something I was heavy for before. We would spend September in Rocky Mountain National Park photographing elk.
Mm,
Um, he kind of reinforced the one thing that he did is he reinforced my want to move into video. I was on the photo side
mhm,
for 10 years, and photos are fun to take. They're easier to take a good photo than a good clip, but I'd want to I'd wanted to get into video, right? Because everyone wants to be a YouTuber. You want to Instagram Reels was coming up, all this stuff, right? And it was all video, video, video.
mhm,
Our iPhones could take decent video all of a sudden. GoPros were at 4K and then they're 5K. And so everything was leading towards video. He kind of reinforced that, yeah, video is the way to go. You can still learn through photography, but video is like where you're going to make money.
mhm.
Um, Now I'll say that 3/4 of my business this year was photography, so you can still make money in photography for
Yeah.
what it's worth. Um, but yeah, he not so much on the wildlife, but a lot on the video side. The wildlife is, I mean, here in Colorado, we're lucky enough. Sorry, my microphone keeps falling.
That's okay. My cat is randomly peeking in and she keeps like pawing at my leg, like, you gonna feed
Yeah.
me or what?
Hello.
It's like it's
That's
too
funny.
early.
Right.
Not yet.
So yeah, wildlife was something that I had done a long time before that. Growing up in the mountains, you see a lot elk and deer and mountain lions. So
Yeah. Oh, that's Yeah, that's such like a transition too from going, being in corporate, you're like surrounded by people and again in the city and just
Yep.
inundated with so much noise and action to now going into wildlife where it's like peaceful and there's a different type of noise, I want to say. I mean, it's I kind of resonate with that as well. As like I grew up on an island and it was,
Yeah.
just outdoor all the time and just being around so much plants and different types of
Mhm.
animals. And it is very soothing and more freeing, I find. Um, so within this journey in videography and well, and I guess in your photography, but would you say that your work has changed or has been influenced by the kind of clients that you've been working with?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we've done yes and no. I mean, I learn from my clients' work mainly,
Mhm.
um, which then leads you to try different things on your personal side. Um, I love motorsports on the other side. So it's like motorsports and wildlife. And so I had a big year last year that we were photographing a lot of motorsports, and it led me to try different things. Like you're taught certain rules of, oh, well, don't try to use high shutter speeds with cars, for example, or different things like that. And so you find yourself just trying to branch out and make it something different. I think with the clients, you don't want to try anything with the client's work, right? Unless they are
Mhm.
wanting something different. But for the most part, you're just, hey, I want a shot of a mover taking a sofa from the house to the moving truck or something, right? And that's a pretty standard, easy shot. But while you're sitting there doing that, there's often times where you're thinking, well, could I do this? Or if I moved over here, if I shot it a different way. And I think that's where it really benefits. And there's times where I'll again be editing what I shot for the client and I'll be thinking, well, why didn't I do this? And so then next time I'm out in the field, I'm like, oh, well, why don't we try and grab this as well? And so it's more of a learning environment than influencing the way because I haven't changed my color grading techniques or any of my editing on the photo side from client work. Uh, and anymore, I mean, you just give away that work
Mhm.
for the most part. You can't use most of it for big clients. They just want it and they pay for the license.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And so how do you build a portfolio for clients that are outside of what you're typically used to shooting?
Yeah. So I built, being wildlife and motorsports, I didn't have a lot of people, right? And
Mhm.
so I found a local studio and it was $75 for an hour, or you could buy the whole, or you could rent the whole studio for $400
Mhm.
for a day. So I rented the studio for a day and I just ran friends and family and friends of friends through there for the entire day. And it was crazy. It was like 20,000 photos in a day.
Oh my gosh.
Right. but,
Yeah.
but I had images after that were people and there was kids and there was grandmas and grandpas and parents and there were some headshots that came through. And so it really like started me off. And so then I would start doing that everywhere else. So like if someone was unemployed, I'd say like, hey, if you're getting back into the workforce, can we do a photo for you? Right. And so that would get my headshots going. Then we would do family photos. And so I'd exchange my photos for another photographer's family photos. And so we'd kind of flip those. And so it was just a figuring out that I needed to have where my gap was and that I needed to have those and just figure out a way to do it. So right now, my big gap is fitness. I don't have a ton of fitness stuff. And so I've been trying to push to find yoga, I guess yogis, I guess is what they call themselves, right? So find some yogis, find some weightlifters. CrossFitters love to do all that stuff. So they'll show off for you any day.
Yeah.
And so that's my big push here recently. I just haven't had enough time to find a gym to find the B-roll. It gets a little harder with
Mm,
video because you need the light and then you bring studio lights. And so you really cause an issue for an active gym. So it's just finding the right spot.
yeah. Well, if you're ever
Yeah.
in Texas or ever go up to Colorado, happy to do some yoga
There you
poses
go.
and stuff with you.
Yeah. So
And
that's
it's
what it's
free.
about. You just find someone that does it and they get some portfolio work and
Yep.
yeah. Yep.
I got to build out my portfolio with some things. So happy to exchange time for prints.
There you go. Exactly. Exactly.
Oh, and so I mean, when you're going into a field like this, what kind of, I mean, do you set yourself up for different goals or do you have like different visions of what you want to do with this? Because initially starting in, you go in and you're doing YouTube and you're getting into more social media and you're doing more corporate work. But like, do you kind of just keep yourself open to those kinds of things or do you have like
Mhm.
certain goals that you build up for?
This year's been a big goal. So I wanted to make $40,000 this year. That was my big push. I wanted to clear 40,000. That would theoretically fix everything on the business side so that you could cover your expenses, and then have money for the family. And I'm lucky that I have a wife that works and like we can split everything. So I am lucky in that regard. But I wanted to have so many jobs done by certain months. In April, I had done 2 jobs for the entire year. And so it was not looking good. And then June hit. It was the end of June, and I was in, where was I? Oh, I was in Endicott, New York, filming, or I was photographing for the PGA Champions Tour out there. And I got a call, and all of a sudden it just like opened the floodgates. And we had, I don't know, there's 12 jobs that next month. And so it just started going. And so I keep saying it's just me and with the company. Sorry, it's an old, so
Yeah.
in corporate world, you learn all these things
Yeah, like
like
we are a
say
team.
we,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's a bad habit of corporate. And so I just worked on that for the next, I don't know, like I just finished up the last project here last week, and it was just go, go, go. So I missed the rut on the elk side. I missed the rut for the whitetail. I missed the rut
Oh.
for the mule deer out here. I think we're going to be late for the bighorn. Bighorn are usually right here in December,
Mhm.
and they were sitting there eating. So that's telling me they're done with the rut. So we missed it all. But that's okay because I was making money, and that was the whole point of this year.
Yeah.
And yeah, so and then my other goal was to just move everything into an actual corporation. So got the LLC formed, got the EIN. So dealing with the taxes, it's a pain in the butt.
But you have an accounting background. Shouldn't that help?
Right. Yeah. Accounting and taxes is like way different. Well, and
Yeah.
like I didn't finish, I finished, so I went through high school
Mhm.
and I went to college and I got halfway through, but I had like a decent job at that point. And I was like, well, this is like 20-year-old thinking, right? I was like, well, I have a good job. I don't need to go to school to find like what I need to do in life and then to go get another job. So why do I do this? And like all of the times that I had midterms or finals were falling on these deadlines and I kept having to make them up. I was like, I'm just not doing this. And so I never finished college. And so I ended up working my way up to the top of a $5 billion company with no college degree.
Hmm.
So you can still do it. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can still do it out there.
Yeah. No, that is interesting. I mean, those are the kind of stories that are few and far between, right? It's just like, yeah, you're sticking with that company though for a while to get up there. I mean, and you've probably seen the company grow tremendously over that time. But were there any points within, I believe you said 10 years, that you were just like, you know what, I think I'm going to quit this job and find something else? Or were you like, no, I'm going to just stick with it and see how it goes?
Oh no, there was so many times where I was going to quit, but I mean the big one is we went bankrupt. So there's technically it was a different company that I worked for after COVID, but so in 2020 the company went bankrupt
Mm.
and a bond came due in the middle of it was April of that year and they couldn't cover it. They didn't have the cash and so debtors called the debt and company went bye-bye. And so they brought in this new CEO and there was a moment where I was like, well, there's no way me and the team are making it through this. And he said, hey, I want you on the team. And let's do this. And so we built the company back up. And I think we came out at like $1 billion in market cap, and we grew that all the way up to 5 billion. Um, Oil prices bounced around a lot. I mean, we had an election in there, and it was I mean, elections are just disasters for Wall Street anyway, just because it's so much volatility.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, there was several times that we'd have big projects. We used to write annual reports, which are these paper documents for shareholders, and it's just telling the year in review essentially, right? And I remember one year we finished this one, and we had done 3 covers, and the CEO grabbed it and just hucked it at me from across the room. And he's like, "This is terrible." And it was like the day before the deadline to print. And it's like, well, what are we going to do? And so it's just like the end, like how do you fix that? And so we ended up going with it and printing it, and he just hated it. But um, there's definitely those moments where you're just like, it's 11 p.m. at night, and you're like, I don't want to do this.
Mhm.
But what's funny is there's times, like as a freelancer, where you're sitting. I had a client that I was on an active taxiway, and we were filming for um, a product on an airplane, and it was just miserable. It was like 120 degrees. There's bugs biting you. You're on the asphalt, and you're just getting obliterated. My camera had come loose from one of the quick release mounts because I bought a cheap quick release mount, and it loosened up over time. And so it fell off in the
Oh
taxiway.
no.
But at the end of the day, it was still like I left that place smiling because it was fun, and I got to control my own destiny. Like if I don't make it, it's because of me now. It's not because of someone else. And so it kind of gets rid of that excuse of like, well, it's because of that person, or oh, it's because of John Doe. And um, I thrive in stuff like that, but it's definitely not for the weak. If you can't be honest with yourself, I would say don't work for yourself, because it's like you got to be a harsh reality to yourself sometimes of like, hey, you're not making the money you are. Like you got to go pick up some jobs and go do something you don't want to do, like kid photography or like portraits or something, right? And
Mhm.
sometimes you do that. But so yeah, there's definitely times where I'm just ready to quit. I will say here recently, like editing videos, there's stages, and you'll go through this with the podcast. There's like the
Yeah.
stages of the edit where it's like you film it, you're feeling good, you get it into the program that you're going to use. We use DaVinci Resolve,
Mhm.
and so you get it in there, and all of a sudden you're like, I don't know, like where do I start?
Oh
And so
yeah.
then you find anything else to do. Like I'm going to go make a croissant or something, right?
I'm gonna learn how to create
Exactly.
this. Okay.
I'm going to make an underwater basket. And so like there's that stage. And then you
Yeah.
have the anger stage of like having to think of it all. And at least for the podcast, it's very like beginning, middle, and end. But yeah, it's usually about halfway through the editing. I'm like, why am I doing this? Like I should just go get a regular job. So,
That's why
but
I'm doing this kind of part-time while I have a regular job, just in case it
yeah,
doesn't work out. It's like, oh, let's
yeah,
just see how this goes.
yeah. Podcasts of the future.
Are they?
I mean, Gary Vee was saying he wants to see a podcast. He wants to see more podcasts, and not that Gary Vee knows what's like. So take that, just if you have feelings about Gary Vee, whatever. But I watch a lot of YouTube, and so Gary Vee was saying that he wants to see more podcast style content make its way into long form YouTube. So
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Yeah, that whole that's one thing that I've heard. I mean, with social media platforms, there's always like that constant and instant gratification, and it's all super short form content. And now there's apparently going to be this like little revolution where now we're going to extend into longer form content. And obviously, if you have longer form content, you can, like we discussed earlier, we can cut it down and make all the smaller pieces necessary,
Right.
but we can have multiple forms in that way.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what I'm planning on doing anyway. So, is sharing it on the different platforms and sharing different pieces and trying to make it as accessible as possible for different people, because I know not everybody's on like Spotify or Apple,
Right.
and I want all types of people to listen to all these different stories and to receive the inspiration from my speakers. So yeah, that's really cool to hear that. provides a little more hope in what it is that I'm doing here. But
Oh yeah, you got this. I mean, it's the biggest thing that you're going to find is just consistency and like perseverance, and that'll do most of the work for you. I mean, you're still going to have to record them and do all that stuff, but just being consistent on, I think, is the big thing right now on social media. And I say social media, but like podcasting, YouTube, all that stuff. A lot of the stuff that a lot of the ones that I enjoyed listening to, um, haven't been going for like a year now. And so they've just kind of stopped, unfortunately. And I mean, there's so many podcasts out there. It's hard to find podcasts though. It's not like I have to ask you like, hey, what's one of your favorite podcasts, right? And then you have to tell me. It's not like I can just go to my podcast app and say like wildlife podcast. You'll get some, but you might miss some really good ones. Like Casey Anderson, who is, everyone knows him as Grizzly Guy. He's the guy that had that big bear. He just started a new one, but he had an old one called Sidetracked, and people just didn't know about it. But it was a really good podcast about wildlife and tracking. He's been a tracker his entire life, and so it's very interesting to hear his perspective of animals. And he spends a lot of time with cougars or mountain lions, and his new one, Wild Tracks, he's been bringing more guests in, and so it's been interesting. But it's hard to find podcasts. I find.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Do you think it's just because of the marketing aspects of it, or just that it's not getting picked up by the algorithm?
I think Apple's just bad at that, to be honest. Like I use the podcast app and they just aren't good at, like, if you read a book in like Kindle, or if you listen to it on Audible, right? You hit that rate and review immediately at the end of that book, and you can rate it, review it. But then it also says like, you may also like, and it's like based on your listening of X, here's some suggestions. And then if you don't like that, you can go to your home screen and you can say like, oh, well, what was that book I read? Like, I don't know, last month, and you can go to that rate and review. And next thing you know, it's like, here's another recommendation. With podcasts, it doesn't do that. So there's not, and I think it's probably, there's no money in it for them, right? Like they don't make anything from it. But I think that'll probably change. I mean, follow the money, right? Everything will change. If people are getting into podcasting, there's going to be something that changes. So.
And do you think that you would have gotten into podcasting had you not gotten into video or YouTube?
Oh, Michael definitely drugged me into podcasting for sure. So I would have just stuck with video and photos.
Really? So do you not like podcasting at all?
I actually don't mind podcasting. I really enjoy talking to people face to face. So it's kind of a natural progression into podcasting. It's just, I don't know. It's the whole sitting here staring at yourself in a screen that kind of, it's just anxiety inducing, right?
Yeah. And I understand what you mean. Like, it is one thing to talk into a camera and be like, yeah, what's up? We're connected. But yeah, in person is so much more fulfilling, I find. And so eventually I'd like to upgrade my gear and get like one of those Zoom recorders and lanyards so that I can go out and be out in the wild, so to speak, and then just record wherever I am with whoever I am. And we don't have to go through the entire scheduling thing. And it's like, I have it. So I'm going to put that on a wish list if any
That's a
listeners
goal,
want
right?
to chip in for that.
Yeah, there you go. Christmas is coming.
Yeah, I know. Well, this whole thing.
I guess you're going to be or this is going to 24 thing, huh?
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They can still buy it for you though.
I know, right? It's just part of my exploration as a creator.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. But I mean, so for me personally, I see that there is an overlap with all of these different platforms. So for you, what do you think has been the most important skill that you learned in any of these platforms that has really helped to step up your game in all of the other ones?
Oh gosh. Time management, and that is not the answer you're looking for. But
I wasn't looking for any answer, just whatever one you provided.
Yeah, time management has been my biggest. I have a little bit of a squirrel brain where it's like, oh, look, shiny object. And so learning to manage that. And that's what a corporate job does, right? It
Yeah.
reels that in. But I guess, let's see, since I've been freelancing, what has been the biggest thing? I think the maybe with clients is actually listening to what they say instead of listening and having an answer all the time, because there's such a want to be that expert for people, right? Where if you come to me and you're like, hey, Brandon, we're going to film this brand highlight video. We have a day to shoot it and we need a minute roll or something like that, right? Then I feel that I need to be the expert in doing that. But sometimes there's things where you just don't know. And it's okay. And this is what I've learned. It's okay to not understand what you're doing sometimes. And maybe it just needs more discussion around it. Or maybe it's just a subject that needs to be fleshed out more. Or maybe they don't know either and they're just looking for insight. And that's been a big thing that I've had to just back off. Like, okay, like actually listen to what they're saying, think about it. Can you answer this? Do you actually know the answer to it? Because it's gotten me in trouble once or twice with being like, oh yeah, we can do that. And then it being much, much larger than what I expected. So, yeah.
Yeah. Under promise and over deliver.
Oh, absolutely. It's hard to do that in the video world now just because everyone has a video camera in their pocket, right? And so there's an expectation that an expert or a professional should be able to do something that an iPhone can't. And honestly, iPhones take pretty good video anymore. So it's more just about storytelling and composition. And storytelling is huge. And that was an early insight into photography and then carried through into video. If you can tell a story through one image, you've done a fantastic job. If you can tell a story through a short video, same thing. If you can put your viewer and stop them for a minute in today's world, right? Because 15 seconds. But if you can make them stop and watch something and have it impact them where they think about something, or later that night they're cooking and they're thinking about something, that's huge. And if you have that, then, you need to leverage that, or you could leverage it, I guess. You don't have to.
Yeah. And so that's a really interesting idea because I go into YouTube and I'm a nerd. Whenever I'm on YouTube, it's always to learn something new.
Right.
So I'm always watching some type of educational thing. And I'll watch these different videos and I notice that different YouTubers, they just tend to mimic each other and the style, and they try to be super cinematic and this and that. And it's like, okay, that's really great. And yeah, those effects are cool. But then again, like I see this happening with all these other videos. So for me, and this could just be me again, but I get like bored of it. And I'm like, okay, this is like the same as the other thing. You guys have the lighting in the back and blah, 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 blah. It's the same thing. So, how, maybe from your perspective, how do you see it maybe affecting the storytelling? Like the visuals are almost distracting from the storytelling. And where do you think the visuals and videography is going to go from there, considering where we are now?
Um, it's hard to say where it goes. I think YouTube has never been more boring, to be honest. And I hate to say that there's a lot of good stuff on YouTube, but I think the mainstream content that we're all fed, so the same video that you see that I see on my You May Like, is pretty boring unless you care about the new Canon Acme lens or whatever it is. And it's just, like you said, it's the same thing regurgitated 100 different ways from 100 different people. That's pretty boring. It may look better on one. There's some people that film absolutely insane
Yeah.
reviews or tutorials or whatever it is. I think what we're going to see, like YouTube's not going away, right? It's the second largest search engine behind Google. And so if someone needs to learn how to do something, they may plug it into Google. But if I need to learn how to change oil on a 1967 Camaro or something, they're going to go to YouTube. And ultimately, that's pretty powerful. That's going to lead to growth, I think, in the future. I just don't know where. I would like to see longer form content come back. And I think we will. as people continue to cut cables and we see people migrating, like some of our biggest demographics are people 64 and older on Truth and Legend,
Mm.
which is incredible that a 64-year-old person is getting on YouTube to watch something and then they watch 20 minutes of it, right? So that's saying something, that they're not watching, I don't know, 9 News or whatever it is at that same time. And I think that'll continue. I think we'll probably start seeing more series-led long form videos, because there's this, you mentioned it earlier, there's that YouTube New Age that's coming out that they're trying to do like more thoughtful, curated long form formats. And I would like to see that come back. I just don't know if people's attention span, we're so conditioned right now to just flick through everything, and shorts is huge. I mean, YouTube is all in on shorts right now.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that's probably not going away. I think we'll see a move into 360 footage becoming a little more accessible and usable. Right now, you got to record it right on a 360 device. Then you throw it into whatever the DJI or GoPro app. You key mark it all, and then you export it into an app. I think at some point in time, we're just going to have it come right through, and it'll be more of a there's a movement going on right now, and I cannot think of it. I've been sitting here trying to think of it, but it's where you're actually in the space where they record like my entire office, and then the users can interact with that and look at how I'm sitting here at a different view,
Oh, like the
which is
immersive.
really,
Yeah.
yep. And so it's all through the
Mm.
Oculus and those 3D things. And we're starting to see like the Apple glasses are coming out,
Oh, like
right?
you
So I
mean
think,
like VR?
yeah, it's
Like,
going to be more like where I'm going to have something on me and I can actually
yeah.
interact, well, visually interact with these spaces. I don't know. I don't know how well. I mean, that's going to be really cool in wildlife, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know how, on the wildlife side, I don't know how we do it, because you need so many different views to build all of that with the AI models.
Yeah.
But that's good for me. It's good for
Mm-hmm.
the group because we get to go back out there. But right now on the video side, people are trying to move everything into like a stock site so that they don't have to pay. We're seeing this on corporate sides. We're seeing on natural history. Everyone's trying to move into this big library of work that they have so that they don't have to pay people to go out every month to make a new blue chip film or something. So
Mm-hmm.
it's good and bad. It's good because wildlife is going to change and the scenery is going to change. The seasons still change. I mean, the salmon ran 2 weeks later in Alaska this year, so it's a different world, different foliage, and it's all good.
Yeah. Different perspectives.
Yep.
Yeah. It is interesting. I mean, I have a 360 like little camera as well, and I've used it to go diving with and just like
Yeah.
doing random shenanigans. And trying to edit it is overwhelming because I'm like, there's so much to look at. Like, what do I focus on? When do I
Yep.
transition here? Like, it's a lot.
Yep.
So if
Yeah.
whenever you decide to like dive into that, I'm happy to get on a call and be like, well, this is what I've picked up so far, or,
Yep.
vice versa, because
Yeah.
that's a whole other beast, I find.
Oh, 360 is it's a monster.
Yeah.
And like I have that like a 1RS right here, and we use it for drift cars. But I find that the footage just isn't up to snuff with what I want.
Yeah.
And so I end up not using it most of the time, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So
I know. And the one that I have, it's the Instas 360 X2. And diving, I put like the dive case on, but it caught the seam. And so half the time it's like you see a line and then it's like half
oh,
of the video is cut off. And I'm like, oh, well,
how frustrating.
yeah, it is. So it's just like, yeah, there's still a lot of quirks that need to be worked out. But again, I don't know if the newer models fix that. So I guess that's something else that you'll have
Right.
to see. But
Well, and that's the thing that we just don't play that game for the most part. We're not buying the newest model that comes out every time. And so we're not in the YouTube review world in that regard, where it's just, I couldn't tell you what the new lens does or anything. We just use old stuff. So
let me open up this box for you.
Right. Right. We do have one of those that we're going to try, but to be fair, it was a giant like red V Raptor camera. So
Oh, okay.
it's like it costs like a small car.
Oh
And
my gosh.
so we did try, we haven't even put it out yet though. So it's in edit right now.
Okay.
So we might have some open box videos out there.
I mean, that's pretty cool. That's something like you never really see though.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not like, hey, here's
Because
my Amazon package of pair of underwear
right.
I just ordered.
Right. Right. Right.
um, no, but that is really cool that you get to work with, different types of gear. But to your point, like when you're transitioning into something new and you decide to become a freelancer, how much how much would you say you should invest in whatever it is that you're getting into? Like, are you going to tell people, hey, just go with like, the minimum amount of stuff so you can just learn the processes first and get whatever you need done and out of the way. And then later you upgrade to better gear? Or do you go in and maybe invest in the intermediate or the high quality gear right away just to get that investment done and out of the way?
Hmm. I would say it depends on where you are on actually becoming a freelancer. So if you're still got a job and it pays well, I mean, you can go do whatever you want, right? Because it's, you've covered your bills, I hope, and you've done everything that you need to kind of handle your life. And so that money is it's discretionary. So, yeah, I mean, for all I would suggest, I mean, go buy whatever you want. If you want to go buy prosumer cameras, do it. The better you know your gear, though, the better it's going to make you in the field. And that can be, I mean, we use GoPros we have an entire 4 months that we filmed just through GoPros because we were trying to use GoPros as camera traps to film these animals because we wanted a close animal interaction. And I mean, gear matters. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you gear doesn't matter. Gear matters 100%. It just, what does it matter for, right? So if you're just filming for yourself or for Instagram Reels, do you need a cinema camera? Do you need FX6 with internal NDs or whatever it is? Do you actually need it? And I think if you can answer that question definitively yes, then yeah, you probably should invest in that or start saving towards it. As a rule that I made for myself when I started this is that I was always going to make the maximum allotment as a percentage to myself, being 15% for my retirement. I was going to save 30%, and then I was just going to invest the rest back into the business. And that's not, I mean, there's no right formula, I don't think. I'm sure there's some guys out there that would tell you a formula that has worked for them, but that's just what has worked for me. And then obviously taxes, like put your money away for taxes. You don't want to owe the IRS anything. But I think you'll know when it's time to upgrade. I had a lot of stuff that I thought was really good coming out of the corporate world, and it was top of the line stuff, and it just don't need it. My favorite camera is my A7 IV, and it's just like the base Sony full frame camera. And it's just because it's a really good hybrid. It takes really good photos, but it can also do video. And so when I'm working on clients, I don't have to carry two cameras. Or if I do carry two cameras, one can be a designated like long lens or something. Whereas the A7 IV I can use for both photos if someone's doing like stage work at events. And then if I need to switch over and just grab a video, like a wide shot, I can do that with the A7 IV and it's done. Whereas like the other one the other one I carry is an A1, and it's great, but do you need 8K footage? Japan is the only place that they can play 8K footage right
Where
now.
are they playing 8K? Because YouTube doesn't have that yet.
No,
Yeah.
no, like there's not even a TV. Well, there's probably a TV you can buy. It's just a lot. Like there's just nothing that you can't even stream 8K right now. So in most worlds, you don't need that. Now I'll say from a natural history perspective, the more resolution that you can get, the more longevity you're going to have for that clip, right? So if we can record it in 8K, at least we get that many more years of usability from that clip
Mm-hmm.
that we can see that bear or that fish or whatever it is, versus having it in 4K. And then as soon as the 6K TV comes out, we're kind of hosed. So that is why we do think about it from that perspective on the wildlife front. But like client work, I deliver most of the stuff in 1080 still because they post it on YouTube and they don't care. So do you really need that 6K black magic camera? Probably not for what you're doing. If you'll know when you do, because your workflow is going to be hampered by time, or there's some efficiency and you're like, this could be so much better, like with NDs, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to carry all the NDs if I had a camera that had an internal ND system. And you'll know that one day. Your computers are going to be another thing, right? So if you start heavily editing 4K footage with like multiple cameras, all of a sudden maybe you don't need that MacBook Air anymore, and you need a MacBook Pro or a Studio, even if you're doing that. So you'll know. I think if you're serious about it, you'll know. But in the beginning, just use what you got
Mm-hmm.
and learn to tell a story. That's the big thing. If you can tell a story, you can do it with any camera. I mean and it's all over YouTube, so I'm sure everyone's seen it. But that Creator movie was all filmed with an FX3.
Oh, I don't know what the Creator movie is. I'm gonna have to look it up.
So it's called The Creator, and it's a sci-fi. I haven't watched it yet, but it's about robots and artificial intelligence, and something to do like the robots and the humans are in a war or something like that. Anyway, it's a big like Hollywood feature film, and it's all filmed on the FX3, which is a $3,500 Sony camera.
Oh, wow.
Now, I'm sure there's like cranes and all kinds of crazy stuff that they use behind that,
Yeah.
but it's all about a story is the point of that. So
Yeah, that's really cool. I'll have to check that out. I mean, it's the way of the future, right?
yeah, it is. Well, and AI
Yeah,
is, I don't
I
know.
know.
I delivered a project, speaking of AI, and this is going to be a tangent.
Mhm.
I delivered a project this year, 100% narrated by AI.
Oh, and
So,
what was the feedback on it?
well, they were a tech company. So I wanted, and I have a good relationship with them. So the first draft I sent over was with this AI narration. And they're like, oh, this sounds great. And I was like, okay, so you're okay with it? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, it's AI. And they're like, oh, this is so cool. And so then all of a sudden they were vested and they're like, okay, let's do more. And so they had no problems with it at all. There's some weird things where we would usually pay a voice actor for, I don't know, 4 hours of time or whatever time it takes them to orate it all and then cut it up and get it all timed out. I probably spent double that on the editing side just because it took so long for me to fix a lot of the issues that we wouldn't have with a person. Me being like, they would say the words differently every time. Because
Huh.
what you do is you put it in this app and you do it line by line. It was called Play HT is what we used. And you use kind of line by line, and every time they'd say something differently. And so you had to figure out a way to fake the AI into getting what you'd want. So maybe you had to add an extra O on something that you shouldn't have it, or a hard E at the end or something. And it took a long time just to get it correct,
Yeah.
but it's still cool.
No, that is. I mean, and that's one of the things that I'm trying to incorporate more is realizing like, hey, we have this technology. We can simplify a number of different processes. We don't have to let it take over our creativity and things
Right.
like that in our art. But, for little basic things or administrative things, like why not use it, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't, I mean, there may be some spots like Chat GPT scared a lot of people. And I know there's the writer block and everything, and they had the strikes. But ultimately, I don't think most people are going to integrate it. Like, you're not going to replace someone taking pictures at a birthday or
Yeah.
something, right? Like, AI is not going to do that. I did see that headshots there's now an AI system that you upload your face into it, and then it redoes everything through AI and gives you like a new headshot, which is pretty cool. Terrible for headshot
Yeah,
photographers, but
definitely. Oh boy. Yeah. Um, I know it's really interesting to see. I was actually at an airport like bar one day and I was just getting
Mhm.
food and I overheard a guy saying, "Yeah, so my buddy, he used AI to write his wedding vows." And I was like, "That's
Oh no.
terrible. I would be so mad. I'd be like, I'm not even marrying you. You couldn't take like
Right.
the effort to write your vows."
That's funny.
Yeah, but it's just interesting to hear all the different ways that people are starting to incorporate it. And yeah, I don't know. It's from like a creative perspective, it's like, wow, is this going to make people lazier in getting in touch with themselves and with their own like creative voice? Like how much is art and creativity going to change because we're relying on technology to do that? So, yeah.
I think we're pretty disconnected right now. I think. I mean, writing has never been lower, right? How many people do you know that actually write anymore?
Like,
Even if it's in a diary,
oh, I do.
right? Right. Guess that's
Okay, I
one.
just it's me and, like, maybe a handful of other people I know.
Yeah, it's just not many people anymore.
Yeah,
And like everyone wants to be a photographer, but it's more just like they want a cool picture from vacation or different thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like go take pictures. But actual like creative, like differentiated work, I'm not doing it. I'm just kind of doing what works and continuing that along. So I don't know. I don't think we're not in a great creative period right now. Like you're not seeing works of art come out of this generation right now.
yeah,
I mean, NFTs maybe, but I I don't know.
yeah. It is really interesting getting into, the social media world and just myself just trying to get into the creativity and expand out on like, oh, okay, how can I do this and how can I mix this and incorporate sound and what am I really feeling as far as music is concerned in this picture or video. And
Mhm.
like I post that on there and I'm like, man, these are so different than what most people are doing
Mhm.
or wanting to see or what the algorithm is trying to incorporate. So it's almost like how many of the original creators' voices are also going to get muted by, these like basic expectations, of like you have to have it this way otherwise we're not even going to acknowledge you and
Right.
accept you. But I
Right.
mean, what's your perspective been on that? I mean, you've already kind
Well,
of stated we're at a low.
yeah, like the problem that most creatives run into is that um, sometimes art isn't for the majority, right? We do it for ourselves most of the time to begin with, and then we want to share that with the world. Where I think sharing it on social media gets to be a detriment for creatives is that when you share that, most of the time you can replace algorithm with audience, right? So if the majority audience doesn't like, it's not that they don't like it, it's just that it doesn't interest them, right? And so if it doesn't interest them, they don't spend time around it. And if they don't spend time on it, the business that is also known as a social media company neglects that and they push it and get rid of that, which then gives a negative confirmation to the artist or the creative. And so it's kind of this like self-fulfilling prophecy in that the minority isn't going to be heard, which makes all the sense in the world, right? It's a minority, so it's not going to sell ads and they're not going to be able to put little Instagram ads into that because no one's going to see it because no one wants to watch it, or the majority doesn't want to, which is a terrible feeling for creatives, right? And there used to be like groups that you could go with, and there all those like local groups. There used to be photography clubs, right? There's maybe one or two photography clubs that I know of here in Denver, and they meet infrequently. You used to be able to go there and get critical feedback and share your work and talk to people, and it's great. And that's why like when we met down at Precision, those were all like-minded people and everyone talked. Like there was several people that came up while you're there and we talked to different people for hours sometimes. Well, we've talked to you for hours.
Yeah.
And like when you meet people that are like minded, it's so connecting, it's so uplifting. And you leave that place just feeling reinvigorated and you have like a new energy, which is the exact opposite of, I think, of what most people feel on social media platform after they post their art.
Mhm.
And like I haven't posted on Instagram for months because I just don't see a point to it right now.
Mhm.
Um, there was a point where almost had to do it for portfolio work just because clients were looking out there, but clients are looking past that. And as long as you have a decent website that you can direct them to, they'll look past that and say, okay, this person knows what they're doing. But I don't know, from a creative standpoint, social media is not a good place for me. Um, my thought for people to share, just because you're not going to get the critical feedback, number one, and you're not going to get any sort of engagement out there. Maybe if you've met the people face to face, like we still engage each other on Instagram.
Mm.
Um, but at the same time, like I've, there's a handful of people that I've met on social media, and there's 1,500 people that still follow me on that account, and I just don't post.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not a big advocate for it, I guess, right now.
Yeah. Uh,
You can learn a lot there, though.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's been interesting because even the way that I want to use social media, it was again, and I'm still trying to break through it, is those blocks of being like, well, I have to get these likes, or I have to have this type of
Mm-hmm.
style or aesthetic, or I have to present it in this type of way. And what I've just decided to do is just be like, you know what? Fuck it. Like, I just want to post. Sorry, my cat
Totally.
is meowing. She's yeah. Anyway, we'll see if she keeps meowing. Um, but it's just to be like, you know what? I'm just gonna put it up there because I just want to share this footage with my friends and
Mm-hmm.
family. And if anybody else resonates with it, then great. But I've been trying to push myself to get into the mindset of like, you know what? I'm gonna take it back to when Instagram first started, where you just posted
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of random shit and you were like, look at all this stuff, and you weren't in it for the likes. You were just doing it to do it.
Right. That wants he wants dinner.
I know. She's so persistent. She's just like, meow. I'm gonna have to learn to edit that out. But
It's all learning process,
it
right?
really is. Yeah. And I mean, like, just going back to my point, it's almost like getting back to just wanting to share all of my pictures and my videos and trying to do a throwback to when Instagram was initially like that, where people just didn't care what it was like and it was just original and authentic. And you're posting for your friends and your family. You're not
Mm-hmm.
posting for all these strangers and what their expectations are. And so I wonder at what point we'll get back to that, where we're sharing again for the sake of the people in our lives versus just, I need to be liked by so and so.
Mm-hmm. I think I think it's coming. I mean, there's that new app. Well, it's not even new anymore, but there's the app that once a day. Gosh, I'm gonna mess this up. I don't have it, so I'm not an expert in this. Um, Once a day, it allows you to post exactly where you are, what you're doing, and that's it.
Oh,
And so it's very much like at 1 o'clock you're taking a photo, and it's me in a classroom or whatever it is. And so people are that was the biggest app last year, I think,
really? That's very new. I've never heard of it.
which is interesting, but I mean, it just doesn't. I don't know. I'm getting old, I guess, and that I just like all these like trends. I'm just like meh, not doing it.
That's how I feel
So
all the time.
right, I just and that's a difference between being in corporate, I think, and freelancing too. Is like my entire world is like I get up at 5:45. I start my day with my cup of coffee because that's the only way it's going to start. And then from there, it's like get the kid ready. Kristen leaves at 6:50, I think. So if if my little guy's awake, then it's breakfast time. Otherwise, it's a fight to like, hey, get up because they change the schedule and he has to be to school by
Mm.
7:45. And so it like you just start going crazy, and then I get back to the house and it's like, all right, well, If I have client work, I jam on that. If I have to send out estimates, I work on that. It's just like go, go, go. So like for me to take, which I should slow down and be like, look around in my world that I'm living in. But I don't know. I'm just not there right now in the mindset of take a phone out to take a picture at 1 o'clock every day or whatever time it is
Yeah.
to share it with an audience. Like I just don't. But then I say that, but then we spent hours filming ourselves on YouTube
Hmm.
to try and help people with like species or like we're doing this bighorn ram that we're filming right now. And we spent 6 hours in the field and we met 4 or 5 people out there that just talked to us over time. And that that is confirmation enough that it's useful. And they went on and like we saw 3 of them just become subscribers that night.
Oh,
And
wow.
so that's really cool engagement, right? So
Mhm.
like that's someone that you met that got something from you that they think that you'll continue to benefit them enough that they subscribe to your channel, and that's huge. Whereas me posting a photo of a drift car or a bear or an eagle or something like that is just not. How does that better someone?
Mm.
I don't know. So that's what I kind of struggle with is, and maybe that's just me being in a thoughtful moment or a thoughtful phase of my life where I'm like, I don't know, is what I'm doing bettering my family or me or the human race? Probably not. And some different outlook right now.
Yeah. No, and that's well, for one, I love all your photos and videos. Like the work that you and Michael do is really awesome.
Thanks.
But I like
Thanks.
I appreciate a lot of that work because I'm also a nerd and I'm like, oh my God, look at all these things. And
Right.
it inspires me to be like, yeah, I want to get out there one day. I want to go and see that one day. And I think the thing that it feels like both of us are just like adventurers at heart. And so it's
Mhm.
almost like we're sharing parts of the world and parts of this life that there are people who will never experience that, or they would never even
Mhm.
think to try to go and experience something like that or see those things. And so that's something that I always try to keep in mind is, I mean, even with this podcast, it's like a random idea. And I'm like, I hope it inspires some people to make a
Right.
change in their life, but I have no idea. I have no idea if people are going to sit and listen to an hour and a half of content or, or subscribe to anything. But
Right.
it's just kind of a leap of faith at that regard. And
Right.
if it doesn't work out, I have gotten a chance to just spend some good quality time with some amazing people that have entered into my life and have inspired me in some kind of way. So, yeah, even if we're not
Maybe I
impacting the
should.
world, impacting at least one person.
Well, and maybe that's something that I need to think about is even a visual can impact someone. Nothing
Mhm.
like you don't need to have earth shattering or life changing interactions with everyone. It can be a simple, oh, I wish I could experience that interaction. So I need to reevaluate that, I think. So that's a good insight.
Yeah, but I don't want to
Yeah.
also, you know, com-
I'll start posting every day again. No, I'm
good.
kidding.
I'm going to hope you do
Right.
that. No, but I understand that sentiment because I've been through that as well. And with the work and the different activities and me just branching out into my own creative journey of trying all these different and very new things, I'm like, what is the point of this overall? And it does get like discouraging, and it is sometimes difficult to find purpose or to remember the purpose behind it. And it's just like, yeah, your passion is like
Mhm.
part of that purpose. And so I understand where you're coming from. So I don't mean to, diminish like what you have
Oh, no,
in any
not at
way,
all.
but like I understand where you're coming from, but that's just like the different lens that I try to put on to just
Right.
get people to keep going. So,
Yeah, the I think maybe it's from wildlife where like there was this ram yesterday and he had a gimp back foot. Something I don't know if he got hit by another
oh,
ram or something, but it was lame and so he was carrying it and just wasn't moving. But he was still just pursuing those females. Like he
What
was
up, girl?
doing the lip exactly. He was doing like the lip curl. He was chasing around. Like he didn't care.
Oh,
But like that was his drive, right? Like it wasn't anything. It wasn't
yeah.
Instagram. It's not YouTube. It's like he has one goal, and it's just driving towards that one goal. And so maybe it's being or maybe um, too single goal focused in that regard. That I just wildlife is very natural, and that there's a definitive end for most things in that regard. Um, I don't know. It's an you get into that whole existential
Yeah,
thought process, right? But I think for me, the legacy, like I have a son, right? And so making the world better for him is what I'm always interested in. Like, how am I going to do that? And sometimes it can be overwhelming, right? Because most of the time, one person can't change the world. There has been that before.
mhm,
And so um, there's times where you have to step back and think, like, well, maybe I can't change the whole world, but I can change his world. So I totally get you.
yeah. But it is great to just have that because it's the same thing. It's like, yeah, I'd love to change the world and
Right.
make this big impact. And when I feel bad or hopeless that or helpless that hey, that might not be a reality in this like in this lifetime, people are like, well, you can change one person's life or you can
Hmm.
impact that one person. And sometimes it's just even saying hi to a stranger or smiling at somebody on the
Yeah.
street. And it's just like those small moments of kindness can really change a person's day completely and their mentality. And just to be seen and acknowledged and heard, I
Hmm.
feel like a lot of people are missing that in their life. So,
Yeah. Yeah. In my travel, well, and you travel a lot, so you've
mhm,
probably experienced this, but there is nothing more powerful than just saying hello or good morning or good afternoon.
yeah.
And just a smile and those few words most of the time will get another smile and usually a hi or a hello back. And it's amazing what just a simple hi or thank you or whatever it is versus just putting your head down and kind of ducking away and walking past someone. Now, some people don't care for it, but more often than not, I've had people just very happy and
Mhm.
good afternoon or whatever. So I'm with you on that one.
Yeah. So, I mean, and the work that you're doing too, it's going to carry on into the future. I mean,
We
as
hope.
yeah, well, no, for sure, because
Yeah.
like, especially with wildlife and nature, and I'm getting more into like wildlife tracking and just
Mhm.
extending my own knowledge and nature and everything that's around us. And a lot of it is like learning about the history of this and the morphology of that and how it's evolved over time, and then learning about certain animals that are now extinct or going into extinction, and then learning about the history there and being like, well, this is what the animal used to look like before humans came in and destroyed their home. But
Yep.
like, I hate to say that the animals that you're documenting now will hit a point of extinction in the future, but if they do, you had that moment in your life where you were able to witness
Right.
that, and you can share that with other people and be like, look, like this is what they look like. Like this is firsthand experience, and this is some scientific backing, or at least evidence of what their behaviors were. And I like to think that eventually we will learn to respect nature and wildlife a little more. And so documenting, like everything that you're going through, I think is important to help with that advancement.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. I I don't know. I mean, you guys down in Texas have the ocelot, which is a small cat,
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
and it's like the habitat is itty bitty compared to what it used to be like most of Texas. And now it's like one little refuge down there. And
Yeah.
so that's something where it's definitely although they're trying to do reintroduction programs, I read. And so they're trying to bring it back to Texas. So that'll be cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you on the wildlife front. It's well, and just like we were talking to I forget if it was a boat captain maybe or maybe it was one of the
Mhm.
guides, but they were talking about the glaciers up in Alaska and how they've seen it recede in the 20 years that they've lived up there. And he had actually taken a picture from 20 years ago and then had taken one recently, and he was looking through his images, and he was surprised how much it's actually moved back. And so it's, yeah, the world's not going to be the same in 10 years. So for, I don't know if it's going to be better or worse, but it's just not going to be the same, which is cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I don't know. I'm like hopeful, but then I'm also like, oh boy.
I mean, it's up to us to change it.
I
So,
know. Yeah, that's
yeah.
true. I mean, like, do you ever see yourself getting out of photography, videography, and social media, considering all the
Uh,
things that we just talked about?
I mean, I don't do Instagram anymore.
Yeah.
I probably haven't posted since, I don't know, it's been months.
Mhm.
YouTube, I like YouTube because you can be thoughtful. Like, I don't have to care what people, sorry, my kid is bouncing around upstairs.
That's okay.
Hopefully you can't hear
My
that.
kid's right here too. She's just like,
Okay.
meow.
Okay. Um, I I don't think so. I mean, I probably won't. I struggle with Instagram just because I don't know. It's a picture, and I don't know. I struggle with Instagram for some reason. I have no idea why. I just don't like the whole interaction with it. But YouTube, I feel like we can be a little more thoughtful, and we can curate what we're saying. We can make it more of a engaging content. And sometimes, I mean, there's going to be things that we have to put out, like the basics of exposure, right? But at the same time, I think those types of videos will help people from a video standpoint. I think a lot of the videos that you would watch right now on video, like like the basics of exposure for video, are going to be over the head of most people. And I think that's where me working with Michael, who's like he's done this his entire life, we can give a different perspective than someone that's just an expert already. They don't have that beginning fundamentals of all the struggles I went with of like, what shutter should I be on to make videos at 24 frames a second or whatever? And like they start talking about the
Yeah.
180-degree shutter roll, and you're like, what's a 180-degree roll, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so it's just being self-taught. You just have a different outlook than someone that went to school for it, and they have like this deep understanding of everything. Whereas I'm like, what's a gray card? And you just like, I don't know, right? You
Yeah.
just have to learn. But that's how most people learn. Like most of us didn't go to school for it.
Yeah.
And so knowing that, I think we can help a lot of people that way. And that's just fun. Plus engaging with people. And I just don't get the engagement on Instagram.
Mm.
Uh, and Facebook, I was never really into. So I would post on there, but it was more just a check mark type thing when I was trying to grow that whole thing. But it's like, what am I growing that for? My business isn't dictated by that. I don't get paid from it. So what is my ultimate um like use in that? And I can't put client work out there. I can't do anything that's really impactful right now. So
Mhm.
I don't know. I just have taken a step back here in the past few months, and I just haven't posted just because I don't have. But you gave me some thought that I need to go think about of maybe there was people that were gaining inspiration from where we've been and some of the pictures we've taken. Um, Michael and I were talking about how we have these bias that sometimes we feel like bears, for example, right?
Mhm.
I have thousands of pictures of bears, and it's to the point of like, well, do I need to show another picture of a bear on there?
Yeah.
But in the end, like, how many people are actually going to get to experience a close up picture of a 1,000-pound brown bear
Yeah.
or a black bear sitting in the top of an oak tree eating acorns, right? And so having that, taking a step back and being like, am I just feeling like it's overwhelming, or is the world still care about this? Is two different things. Well, in the world, like to the point earlier, like the world doesn't have to care about it. Like you just have to care about it.
Yeah. And that's really interesting too because and that gave me an idea as well, but I know for like my tracking courses, I'm trying to record more of like the lessons and the conversations that we have around certain things and I'm trying to share that more either on my personal account or my school's account. And I'm wondering if, if you and Michael were to reach out to specific institutions or schools or educational networks that work with these different animals, whether it's conservation or,
Mhm.
again, like a tracking school or something, because in that regard, for me personally, like with tracking, we got a book and we see all the different tracks, all the footprints,
Right.
or paw prints, I should say. But
Yeah.
then they wouldn't have a picture of an animal, and I'm like, "Well, what the heck does this animal look like? I'm not native to Texas, so what the heck kinda animal am I supposed to be
Right.
envisioning right now?" So, obviously, with, like, bears, it's kind of easy to
Mhm.
identify that, but it's one thing to go through and be like, "Oh, a bear was here because they exhibited this type of behavior," or they were
Mhm.
climbing into a tree and they were, pulling back the branches to eat, the berries or the nuts or
Mhm.
whatever. It's one thing to try to envision that, but if y'all are actually getting footage of this stuff, it's easier for people and students to now start putting together the pieces and being like, "Oh, this is what they're doing when they're doing
Mhm.
whatever action." So, I'm wondering if that
Yep.
could be like another outlet for y'all too.
Well, and that yeah, the problem we usually run in with that is that a lot of those schools, like, it's all based around money, right?
Mhm.
And so they they either, because a lot of that footage is unique, right? Not a lot of people have a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's like, do you part with it for free just because ultimately we're not rich by any of these things, so you do have to have some money.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. It's a balance. We've been toying with like an educational program for like younger. Um, I don't even know what the PC term is. Young people now, and
The PC.
right. I don't know.
Yeah.
And but yeah, like people that I always thought it would be cool to introduce people that didn't have the means to do it, right? Like we all have a phone, so we can all start there. But a lot of people just don't understand that it's so much about a story. I
Mhm.
think the generation that's coming up probably has a better idea than you and I did when we started this out, just in that they've been a TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat world where stories matter, even though they don't maybe understand that perspective.
Mm.
But it's an entire generation that's comfortable in front of a camera, right?
Yeah.
And so that's already that much ahead of where most of us were that have been doing this for a while. But we've thought about an educational program surrounding that. The hard thing is just getting. I've reached out to a few schools and they want to put a curriculum around it, and it needs to be more fluid. Like people learn photography at different speeds, and to put a course, you can put coursework around it, but it needs to be very much driven by the individual, right? Individuals are the ones that are going to change, not the coursework changing them. If someone wants to learn exposure, they're going to go figure it out.
Mhm.
But I can tell it to them 1,000 different ways, and that's not going to make any sense if they don't care about it. So
Yeah.
it's just finding those individuals and getting that out there. So we have a small group that we've identified, and so we'll probably start moving towards that in the future.
Hmm. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that just gave me an idea for a potential collaboration, but I will
Mhm.
share that with you off camera.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, because I mean, that's what I love about connecting with different people is
Hmm.
I can connect them to the people that I know
Hmm.
because it is a small world. And
Right.
when I have my network, it's like you guys are all connected. You don't realize that you're connected, but you are through me.
Right.
And I love just getting my friends together and being like, "Hey, like you have this in common with this person, and I know you guys would never meet any other time in the world, but like
Right.
I want to make those introductions because you guys can learn from one another and
Hmm.
um collaborate on different things and just develop your own friendships and connections. And so I always love like connecting people in that way. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'll think about it and I'll
Cool.
pitch it out and see what kind of traction I can get from you guys.
Yeah.
And then that party too. I have to figure it out. But
Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, like on a business side of things, kind of backtracking a little bit, but if
Hmm.
somebody is getting into social media and they're like, okay, I'm a freelancer and I want to do the social media work or get on podcasting and YouTube and all of that. When you're forming an LLC, um, or even an S corp, let's say, is all of
Mhm.
that going to fall under the same bucket, or are you essentially creating a different business for each type of platform? Like, how is it that you guys are
Mm.
going about that?
So we are actually separate companies completely. So my company is actually it's Daybreak Media, and that's a separate LLC. Then we have Truth and Legend, but then Michael has his own Morrow Media platform that's been around for years. And you'll find that as a freelancer, if that's what someone wants to get into, as a freelancer, you got to protect yourself first and foremost. You're going to have your own insurance. And through most things, like if you're a Professional Photographers of America um, member,
Mm,
you get that insurance through their membership fees. And so just use those membership fees and use those services. When you begin, you'll be able to leverage that. As you grow in your work, you're probably going to need to up that insurance just because $1 million will only cover so much in the corporate world. If you are working with a prototype system and you break it or you break something that it's going on, is it worth $1 million or is it worth more? So that's the kind of thing you have to ask yourself in the beginning, right? If you're doing like sports stuff and I don't know, if you break a ladder or you break a backboard, it's probably less than $1 million. Um, so that's just something to be considerate of. But on the social media front, I think that would all just roll into one LLC. I mean, obviously check with your local areas, but for me, I just roll everything into my one company. We do when I was doing my Instagram stuff, which I'll probably get back into, but the Instagram stuff all rolls into that. The YouTube, everything just rolls into the company. And then that way it's separated from my personal world. You could run an entire company as a sole proprietorship. It's just risk adverse. How adverse to risk are you, right? So
mm,
a consideration to make is that if you mess something up, if you're out in a grocery store doing a TikTok dance and you slip and fall, or let's say you hit something and someone else slips and falls and they sue you, they sue your company. As a sole proprietor, you're exposed to that. If you're in a company level, then you have a certain level of insulation from that. And so it's just how much risk you want to take. If you're doing things that probably aren't that risky, then I don't know. You're gonna have to weigh those benefits and detriments because you are gonna. It's a separate tax number. You're gonna have to do taxes. You got to save receipts. I mean, there's a whole box back here of receipts that I have not scanned in yet that I'm just not looking forward to. And it's December, so
Oh, yeah.
it's I don't know. It's just how much you want to go through, and if you're gonna stick with it. I think it's again, you'll know when you need to have a company around it.
Mm,
When people start, if you're to that point where people are reaching out on Instagram like, hey, I want to work with you, and they're a good brand or maybe a small brand, like, yeah, work with them and see where it goes, because there's been some accounts that they've made a ton of money doing that, and they just do brand photography and or just do brand sponsorships, which is awesome.
mhm. And so for you, how have you filtered through um, different kinds of companies that have reached out? I mean, I know on Instagram, there's tons of random businesses that are like, yeah, we're just popping up, or we'd love to have you, and blah 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 blah. And how are you sorting through the scam profiles versus like the legitimate businesses?
Yeah, I find that most of the time the legitimate businesses will reach out to you either through a channel or through an email that is relatable to the brand or product. Whereas the scams are like, hey, if you're interested in this sponsorship, reach out to this account and they'll get you all the stuff you need. Where it's like you're doing the engagement versus them engaging you.
Mhm,
And we just don't even engage with any of that stuff. We have not taken on any sponsors for our channel or our product. We just we want to if we're going to do that, we want to make sure we believe 100% in it. We do have some ambassador and affiliate codes. I'm an Atlas Pack.
mm,
They're a backpack company. I'm an Atlas ambassador, so I can get some affiliate money from them when people buy through my links and stuff like that. But for the most part, we just try to stay humble, be honest about things. You're going to see a review out there at some point in time about some of the nomadic bags that Peter McKinnon has. If you're a wildlife photographer, that bag is not going to work with you. I will tell you right now, it is going to break down
Oh,
and it is not good.
yeah.
So, um, I don't know. We'll be honest and we'll probably get shunned for that, but at the same point, that's kind of what we don't want people spending $400 on a bag that's not going to work for them if they're
Yeah.
doing the same thing we are.
Yeah, you have literal field experience. I mean, that's like user
Yeah.
acceptance testing of different products and devices. It's like,
Yep.
well, you're obviously going to compare different types of things. So
Right.
they have to be ready to hear the harsh feedback from their product. It's like, that's what you get for
Yeah.
putting a product out. Make sure it's actually good.
Mhm.
Otherwise, people are going to.
Well, and I think for the majority of people, like if you're a
Mhm.
street photographer or you're like a hobby, like the majority of people, I think that bag's gonna be great for them. But the second you start dragging that through, well, and I wasn't even doing like wildlife field work. I was doing golf field work for commercial stuff,
Yeah.
and it just fell apart on me.
Oh,
And the zipper broke. Well, two zippers broke on me. One of the poles came off. Like it was just a bad day. And so I
yeah.
ended up carrying all my stuff around in a duffel bag for the rest of the trip,
Oh,
just all of it clinking together.
no.
So
That's
it was,
terrible.
but yeah, because you usually have like a long lens that you put over your shoulder,
Yeah.
and then you have another like wide angle or like a 24 to 70 on a sling,
Mhm.
but then you have a backpack with all the other stuff in it, and all that stuff ended up in the duffel, which was okay. It was fine, but
Yeah, you learned.
I did quickly.
Yeah. So I mean that kind of goes back to to show like, invest in good gear but expect for things to fall apart or break, and that's part of like the overhead cost that you have to, filter in
Yeah.
for whatever business you're into. It's like make sure you plan for an overhead or have like a little
Mhm.
savings or emergency account for those repairs or extra gear or emergencies or whatever else you may encounter, but
Yeah, I mean, I haven't checked here recently, but in November I had done 500,000 shutter exposures in one of my cameras
Mhm.
this year alone.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. And so like you'll do an event, if you want to be an event photographer, learn how to photograph in low light, and because sometimes you're not going to be able to use flash, and figure out how like banding is going to be a huge issue unless you have the new A9
Yeah.
Mark II. But like banding is a huge issue for mirrorless cameras and it's a simple fix. But learn how to fix that on your camera and then just get ready because you're going to take 10,000 photos or 15,000 photos because you're trying to get that one shot where the person's not like, right?
Yeah.
And if they're talking, that's what they're doing most of the
Yeah.
time. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's like it's a fun journey. I mean, like there's a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
things that go into, and half the time I'm like, I don't know what any of these settings are on my camera, but I'm just going to push buttons and yeah, I'm going to
Yep.
hope for the best. And
Yep.
yeah, that's how it is.
It's how you learn.
Yeah. And so, Brandon, as we go to wrap things up, do you
Mhm.
have anything that you would like to share with the audience? Uh, anything that's maybe inspired you, or any final tips, or whatever final words? Anything you want to share?
Hmm. Uh, I don't have. I mean, for those of you that are feeling like maybe there's not a future in photography or video, like just hang in there, keep going. Uh, it is a hard trip, but just hang in there and keep going. It is so fulfilling once you get there, and just keep striving for it. The more you can learn, better off you're going to be. So I don't know. It's nothing deep or insightful, but I don't have much else for you.
No, I think that's perfect. Honestly, just
Yeah.
keep going. That's all we can do. I mean, in anything that we're doing in life, just keep going because you are going to hit those walls, you are going to hit those hurdles, and you're going to have higher mountains to climb as you keep accelerating and moving up. But
Hmm.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And again, I really appreciate seeing your work. And I really hope that Instagram doesn't deter you from sharing it. We'll have to figure out like maybe there's a
We'll figure
different
it out.
platform or something else.
Yep.
Maybe we'll just create a new one or something.
Right.
Because it's so important to see that. And I love seeing your work and Michael's work. And it's like, those are the things that I would love to do one day. But again, I'm living through you. And so I
Yep.
hope that you continue to share that and realize that you are inspiring people, at least me anyway, in the kind of work that you're doing. So
We'll put some out there for you.
thanks.
Yeah.
And I'll check in too. I'll be like, I haven't seen a video or
Right.
picture in a
Where is
while. So
Well, it's funny because I think we gave you homework when we were
I
done,
know.
and then we're the ones that aren't doing that. So,
Oh my gosh.
whoops.
Well, the homework was, I think, to start the YouTube, which I kind of did, but then I ended up just starting a podcast instead. So
I
I don't know.
mean, find your own voice, right? It doesn't matter. It's all good. The point was to start because I
Yeah.
think actually there's a great thing to end on. I think what so many people get caught up in is, well, when I'm ready, I'm going to go be a freelancer and I'm going to go do
Yeah.
video and photos. When I'm ready, I'm going to go make a YouTube. When I'm ready, I'm going to go be a podcast. Look, you're never going to be ready. Just
Mm-mm.
jump in and do it. And you're going to learn so much more, so much faster as soon as you do it. Now, you can figure out ways to avoid that risk and maybe not like put your entire financial instability into being a freelancer,
Right.
but like just go do it. Like it's scary, it's anxiety inducing, but you got this. Like just stick with it. So yeah, I think there's a good one to end on. You can end on that one.
Yeah. I like that too.
Yeah.
Well, Brandon, thank you so much for your time and for all of your knowledge and insight into this because I know it's an industry that is just evolving before our eyes with all these different types of technology and platforms. So I really appreciate you. And for our listeners, feel free to check out Brandon's Instagram and his website and YouTube and podcasts. I'm going to include all of that stuff in the bio. So feel free to go check that out because he has, again, a lot of really cool photos and videos. And again, even like the car photography, like I really like, there's like some really cool drifting ones. And so that's just
Yep.
really cool to see.
Yep.
And then, yeah, just continue to support him. And so thank you all so much for your time. And until the next one, thank you.